Alrighty guys, this is Will coming at you with a new post on the Detroit Lions. Anyway, so I want to give you a little backstory before I start this informative speech for class. Anyway, so, and by a little bit of backstory I mean a little bit of history on me and why I'm so into the Detroit Lions, really any Detroit sports team, the Lions, the Tigers, the Pistons, the Wings. If it's a sport teams from Detroit, I follow them. I don't even like baseball really, and I still follow it just because I'm diehard from Detroit and I represent my team 100%. In fact, one thing you guys saw in the last video that I posted, sorry I had to get this up off the shelf, you actually saw this phone case, which I actually made with a 3D printer. This is how much I love my Lions. I painted this and printed this with a 3D printer. So as you can see, I'm diehard about my Lions. I have hats, shirts, coats. I have a Detroit tattoo. My truck even shows Detroit because I love my city so much. So anyway, a little bit of backstory on me and why football is so major. So I grew up in the city of Detroit. With me growing up in Detroit, there was only like two things to do being a kid in Detroit, Michigan, and that was either join a gang or play sports. I chose to play sports. My sport of choice was football. So I played football at Detroit Catholic Central. I was raised in a Catholic school. It isn't a private school, but it is a Catholic school, so I was raised a little bit Catholic, though I am a Southern Baptist. Anyway, I was a running back for Detroit Catholic Central, and I had a full-ride scholarship playing for Michigan State University my senior year. I tore my ACL my senior year playing basketball, trying to stay in shape for football season. Bad idea, I guess. Anyway, so there's that little bit of backstory on me. Now I would like to get into our speech, so let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. We're going to start off with a little bit of history on the NFL. We might throw a little bit of stuff in there about the AFL, but finally we're going to get to the history of the greatest NFL team in the history of the NFL, and that is one of the longest running NFL teams, and that is with a 91-year tenure within the NFL, the Detroit Lions, and how they started out. Now, the NFL was actually founded in 1920 in Canton, Ohio. Couldn't tell you who the guy was that founded it. I didn't go into looking into that. But again, it was founded in 1920 in Canton, Ohio. The first president of the NFL was Jim Thorpe. Now, a little bit of cool information about that is Jim Thorpe was actually an NFL football player too. Pretty cool that an NFL player was actually the president of the NFL. The NFL's original name wasn't even the National Football League. The original name for the NFL was the APFA. That stood for American Professional Football Association. Now it's been changed. It's the NFL. The current president is Roger Goodell, who hasn't played professional football a day in his life and doesn't know the first thing about being a professional football player. All he is politics. Now, with the original creation of the APFA, there were only 14 original teams within the APFA. The APFA consisted of teams from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, New York. They had 5 of those teams were Ohio football teams. The next one was Illinois with 4. 2 of them from Indiana, 2 from New York, and 1 from Michigan, who was actually named the Detroit Herald. Now we're going to give you a little bit of cool information here. The Detroit Heralds were the first NFL football team that were in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan had 2 other teams that failed before they got the Detroit Lions. And the really cool thing about the Detroit Heralds is the Detroit Free Press. They also have, before it was called the Detroit Free Press, it was called the Detroit Herald. Now, there are only 2 of the original NFL teams left within the league, and they are both Illinois teams. Go figure. So the first team was actually called the Chicago Cardinals, and Cardinal is actually a street in Detroit, Chicago. It's Chicago or Cardinal Street in Chicago. They actually moved down to St. Louis, and later on was reestablished down in Arizona and went on to be what we know as the Arizona Cardinals today. Now the other team came from Decatur, Illinois, and they moved up to Chicago to replace the Chicago Cardinals, and they were renamed the Chicago Bears in light of the Chicago Bears that we know of present day. In 1970, the AFL and the NFL actually merged. So this merger actually started out in 1966 with the creation of the NFL and the AFL, which also go in to create the Vincent Lombardi Trophy. During this talk of a merger between the AFL and NFL, one of these major people that wanted to create this major actually drew out a picture of what was to become of the Vincent Lombardi Trophy. And at that time, it was called AFL NFL World Championship Trophy. And it was inscribed on the trophy at that time. Now, it is called the Vincent Lombardi Trophy. It was renamed in 1970 after Vincent Lombardi, who actually won the very first two Super Bowls of 1966 and 1967. And it was named after him after he had passed of cancer. He was a very legendary coach. I give a lot of respect to the guy. I give a lot of respect to his kid, who is actually a defensive coordinator within the NFL currently right now. He was a defensive coordinator on the Detroit Lions. So now that we have this little bit of backstory information, with that merger that happened in 1970 between the AFL and the NFL, it created a 26-team circuit. Now, this circuit consisted of 26 teams that we don't have, or that we don't have today, or that we do have. It was actually what their lineup consisted of, like the Lions playing the Cardinals, and then playing the Bears, and then playing the Vikings. That's what I mean by their circuit, their 26-game circuit. Now, since that merger in 1970, the NFL has expanded 4 times and brought in 6 new teams. And those teams were in 76, they brought in the Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 95, they brought in the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers. Then in 97, they added the Baltimore Ravens. And in 2002, they added the Houston Texans. Now, a little bit of backstory on those Ravens that we were just talking about, the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore has had actually 2 or 3 different attempts at getting an NFL team, and with that, a few other attempts. One attempt before the '97 expansion of the Baltimore Ravens being in there, I believe, was back in like the early 90s, and they did a vote on what should be the Baltimore's team name, and one of the team names was, I believe it was the Baltimore Boilers, and Ravens was also a come up of it. But at that time, the person that was going to own the Baltimore Ravens thought Ravens would be a bad idea because it would look too much like the Atlanta Falcons, and people would get the teams confused. But as we can see today, that actually hasn't happened. So now, I really want to get on these Detroit Lions because it's really, really interesting behind these guys. All right, so the Detroit Lions actually started out in 1928. They started out in 1928 on the Ohio River Football League. They started out in Portsmouth, Ohio. They started out, their team name was the Portsmouth, Ohio Spartans. And while there, they had a good run. But With 2019's NFL season coming up, this makes them one of the longest running NFL teams with a tenure. That makes them 91 seasons in the NFL. This is an amazing feat because most of the teams haven't been there that long. There's only two other teams that have been there longer than them, and that's the Chicago Bears and the Arizona Cardinals, as we know from previous information. But with them being the third longest running NFL team, that's pretty awesome. I mean, at least I think so. I don't know about anybody else. I think it's really cool. Now, before Portsmouth Spartans got moved up to Detroit, renamed the Detroit Lions, in 1932, they actually played a very pivotal game within the NFL's history. They played it against the Chicago Bears. In 1932, the Portsmouth Spartans and the Chicago Bears had a tying record. They were 7-3-2. And with this record and them being the tying teams within the NFL, they had to hold a championship-style game or playoff game, if you will. And this is actually what started the NFL having a playoff game. The Portsmouth Spartans went on to lose this match between the Spartans and the Bears, but nevertheless, it was a pivotal moment within NFL's history and within the Lion and the Chicago Bears history that brought us to this point. This, again, like I said, it was a very pivotal moment with both of these teams and within the NFL, so much so that it actually caused a split within the NFL, and it wasn't a split that was bad. It actually became what we know today as two different conferences, such as the AFC and the NFC. It also brought on the need for a major championship game within the league, and it also brought 3 major rule changes within the NFL. These rule changes, I'm not quite sure what they are, but nevertheless, again, it was a very pivotal moment within the history of the NFL and these two team franchises' history. Now, in 34, a man named George Richards, who actually owned WJR Radio up in Detroit, Michigan, went down. He bought the Portsmouth Spartans off of the Ohio River Football League's roster and brought them up to Detroit, renamed them the Detroit Lions after their counterpart, the Detroit Tigers, who are in Major League Baseball. With their first season, the Detroit Lions actually went on a 10-game winning streak. So their first 10 games, they won without a loss, which was really awesome for a startup team being new within the league. They went on, after that 10-game winning streak, they went on to lose the last 3 games of the season, 2 of them being to the Chicago Bears, 1 of them being to the Green Bay Packers. With this loss from the Chicago Bears, these 2 losses from the Chicago Bears and this 1 loss from the Packers, it put them in second place, which still is really good being a new team within the league. They were really good, obviously. But some really cool information here. Detroit Lions in their second season in the league actually went on to be the first place team within the league. So 2 years in and they're already the top team. Really freaking awesome. That 1935 gave them their first championship. It wasn't really called a championship back then. It just they were the first champions. So now back to 1934. So when they entered the league, Mr. Richards, George Richards, what have you, actually secured them a game that we football fans watch every Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving Day game. Detroit, other than one other NFL team, is the longest standing team to have and own a game on Thanksgiving Day. Many other teams have attempted this, just without as much success. The only other team that's got as much success as the Lions with their Thanksgiving game is the Dallas Cowboys. Homage to them. My great grandmother's a very big fan. That's where she grew up. But like I said, I'm a Lions fan. I grew up in Detroit, so just give them a little bit of props. Emmett will never be what Barry was. So now we're going to skip a few years, skip forward into the 1950s. So the 1950s actually happened to be a great era for the Lions. They went on to win four division titles. I thought I'd just leave you in suspense there. 4 division titles. They went on to win 3 national championships. Those national championships happened in 1952, 1953, and 1957. Now this is again before they named it the Super Bowl. But in any case, Lions are 3-time national champions. They just haven't won a Super Bowl. So it really doesn't matter. It's the same thing, I guess. No, actually, national championship was before the merger with the NFL and the AFL. With it being before that merger, it was just their national championship. It wasn't until 1966, like I said, that the NFL started the Super Bowl. Now, since 1957, the Lions haven't really had a whole lot of luck. They actually went on a 26-season losing streak. They didn't see a playoff game or anything for 26 years. The best things they got were a couple of wild card berths, and those were in 70 and 82. It wasn't until 1983 that the championship drought actually ended. And they were awarded. They went on to be the NFC Central Division champions. Then in 91 and 93 with Coach Wayne. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to pronounce this 100% correct, but with Coach Wayne Futas at the helms and with star running back Barry Sanders, they actually went on to win divisional titles, and these two took the Lions to their first NFC Championship game, which was in '91. They lost, but they still went on to play in the the NFC National Championship game. Since then, the Lions have had a lot of great players. They just haven't had a whole lot of luck. Now, I don't mean great players as in Scott Mitchell, but they did have Warren Moon at one time. They've had current roster. They've had star quarterback Dante Culpepper on their team, who really didn't help out a lot. They've got Matthew Stafford, who's a really good quarterback. They've had one of the all-time great receivers, Calvin Johnson, who went on to break Jerry Rice's long-standing season game receiving yard record. They've had Golden Tate, who just last season got traded off to Philadelphia. But nonetheless, I still think the Lions are the greatest team in the NFL because they helped shape the NFL into what it is today. Now, the Lions when they started out, the Lions were at University of Detroit Stadium in Detroit, Michigan, or downtown Detroit, Michigan. And in I can't remember the year, but sorry about that. But they were moved to Bakersfield, which was the home of the Detroit Tigers, again their counterpart in the Major League Baseball League, where they played for 37 years. And then in '75, they moved to the Pontiac Silverdome, which is just outside of downtown Detroit. And again, they played for another 37 years. And then in '02, they were moved back downtown to Detroit, or back to downtown Detroit, where they currently play at Ford Field, which, small little bit of information here, the Lions currently play at Ford Field, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you know what Firestone is. They're a tire company. We all know that Ford is a car company. So, a Ford owned the Lions all the way up until 2014, and he was married to a Firestone. So a Firestone currently owns the Detroit Lions, which, I mean, that's all right. That's cool. I can live with that. Now we're going to exit here. We're gonna wind down a little bit from the Lions. I don't know how excited you were about them. I like I said, I really love my Lions, man. I can go on all day. I've got a bunch of stuff we can talk about the Lions, but I want to cut this video a little short. I want to give people the time to absorb some information. So this last little bit of information I'm going to give you is just a reiteration of some information I gave you a little bit earlier. The first Super Bowl was held in 1966 between the AFL and NFL. It was a championship game to find out which company was the best. Now the AFL, it started out because some businessmen, they wanted to own teams within the NFL. The NFL didn't allow them, so they created their own league, the AFL, which is the American Football League. AFL and NFL went to bat for battled for years for stardom, for fans, for money, for funding, for players. They were head to head all the time. And in '66, that's when they started talking about their merger, about being merged by 1970. And in 1970, there was a merge. Now, again, the Lombardi Trophy was originally called the AFL-NFL World Championship game. That's what the trophy was inscribed with. Then in '70, it was reinscribed with the Lombardi Vincent Lombardi Trophy. Now, again, there's other teams by far that have probably done more. I mean, teams such as the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have 6 Super Bowl rings. There's only like 4 other teams that have 4. The Denver Broncos are the most losing Super Bowl team. They've got 4 recorded Super Bowl losses. New England Patriots have went on to be the most viewed within the Super Bowl with, I think they've been to the Super Bowl like 11 times or something like that. I mean, there are teams that are really great within the NFL, but this is a true underdog team. Everybody looks down. They're not one of the popular teams. The Lions aren't one of the popular teams, and that's another reason I love them, is because they're not popular. And you get somebody that will turn around and you say, oh man, I'm a Seahawks fan, or I'm a Patriots fan, or something like that, man, and you feel like they're a bandwagon team. Like you've got all these popular teams that got all these fans, but you find a Detroit team and you can't find a fan unless you're in Michigan, and half the Michigan people aren't fans. The Northern Peninsula teams, Michigan residents, they're all fans of the Green Bay Packers because they're closer to Green Bay, Wisconsin than they are to Detroit, Michigan. So, I mean, like, being a Detroit Lions fan, it means a lot to me, and again, it means a lot to me just because of the fact that I'm from there, I don't live there, and being somebody that can give people information behind these guys, you know, because I've done history or research on them for many years. I followed them since I was knee high to a grasshopper, man. I'm telling you, go, if not today, tomorrow, or next week, or before the season starts, man, go do some research on the team you love. Find out more about the team you love. I mean, some teams don't have as much history as the Detroit Lions. Some teams have more. But on the team you love, just go find out just a little bit of information, a little bit of backstory. Find one reason why you love them, other than this is where I'm from, or it's an expansion team, or something like that. Like, find a reason to love them. Because, I mean, my reason for loving them, yeah, I'm from there, but this team is a true underdog story. You know, they haven't had a Super Bowl or a championship ring since since the 1950s, man. They're one of the hardest fighting teams in the NFL, and they'll get there. But I challenge everybody to go find out just a little bit of information about their favorite NFL team or their favorite sports team, period. Doesn't matter if it's the NFL or if it's in the NCAA. Go find out just a little bit of backstory on that team. The reason I love them for the backstory is because they have so much history. They have so much history within the NFL that their history dates back 91 seasons. That's 91 years with the NFL. That's amazing. And there's plenty of more history between the 1935 and the 50s that we didn't even cover. I just covered their little bit of fame that they've had. I mean, they've had great player, another great player, Dick the Night Train Lane. He was a great guy, great player. They've got so much history and they don't have that one win. That's what makes them amazing. Anyway, I'm signing off here. I appreciate everybody watching my video. Again, my name's Will, and I want to wish everybody a good evening, a nice day, a happy new year, a happy Christmas, a happy birthday, whatever it is for you, it's a happy one.